After a very brief calmer interlude, maybe around the bells, another weather system moving in for New Year's Day, bringing a renewed risk of rain, wind and snow.
We'll see a cold snap, which will quickly develop into a warm front. Boxed Boiler Repairs, sponsors of weather on GB News.
You could be joining the Great British Giveaway list of winners with your chance to grab a fantastic £50,000 in tax-free cash.
My name is Cliff.
And my name is Julie, and we won 25,000. I'd say don't hesitate, do it. If you're not in it, you've got no chance of winning it.
For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 31st of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
What do you think?
Morning. I think we have failed young drivers as a society, and we need to train them better and train them earlier. I think that the idea of stopping them carrying passengers for 6 months is a good idea because you've got peer pressure within a car. So yes, but I think graduated licenses are really difficult. You've got what we call the 3 E's, which is education, educating kids to drive earlier, and engineering, which is making roads better and safer, and then comes enforcement at the end of it. So I think we're failing in these two first ones, the education and the enforcement. I put my kids, all 3 of them, through a thing called Young Driver, which allows under 17s to drive on private land with ADI instructors and learn the craft of driving and all the below the dashboard stuff and hazard awareness long before they try and do this very compressed period of time to learn about driving. I think we're failing them. So I want to see it in schools, and I want to see them being taught much, much earlier.
Nobody's actually pointing the finger of blame, I think, at the young driver, but maybe young drivers don't understand how different it is. You feel you can drive, you've passed your test, and then a load of your friends get in the back, and suddenly the mood is different, the pressure on you as a driver is very different, showing off, just larking around and having a great time. Aisha, how do you feel about the fact that clearly young drivers do need to be protected almost from themselves, don't they?
Well, I do agree with some of what Quentin has just said, especially about starting early and especially about getting young people used to the dangers of being on the road.
GB News, the People's Channel.
It's 9 p.m. I'm Ben Leo. Tonight, the secretive deal to give away the Chagos Islands to Mauritius has been exposed today. In a shocking revelation, can you guess just how much British taxpayers could be forced to cough up every year for the privilege of giving away our overseas territory? The figure will rock you. Also tonight, at least under Blair, we were told things could only get better. Now, a damning new poll reveals half of Brits think next year will be worse than this year. So, can Sir Keir Starmer survive 2025? Elsewhere, the boats keep coming and the deaths continue. 3 more fatalities in the English Channel this morning. So when do we start calling Labour's Smash the Gangs policy a failure? And after a huge poll of 11,000 Brits shows Labour would lose 200 seats in a general election under a hung parliament, is it time for reform and the Tories to end the squabbling for the sake of the nation? Tonight's panel are ready to go. I'm joined by Editor-at-Large at The Mail on Sunday, Charlotte Griffiths, former Conservative MP Neil Parish, and the former Labour advisor, Susie Stride. And as Starmer asks Ofwat and Ofgem for ideas on how to boost growth, was Liz Truss right after all?
I'm afraid to say the right honourable gentleman doesn't understand aspiration. He doesn't understand opportunity.
The proposed cost of giving away the Chagos Islands to Mauritius has been revealed today, and the figure, I promise, will stun you. That's next. But first, your news headlines with Sam Francis.
Very good evening to you from the newsroom. The top story tonight. The Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, and the King have paid tribute to the victims of a plane crash in South Korea that killed all 179 passengers and most crew on board. The Boeing jet carrying 181 people skidded off the runway, crashed into a fence and caught fire after its landing gear failed to deploy. Emergency responders rescued 2 members of the crew, while investigators now consider factors like a possible bird strike that could have caused engine failure. While the crash is one of South Korea's deadliest, with only the tail of the aircraft now remaining recognisable. Earlier, travel and aviation expert Sally Gethin spoke to us about the events that led to the crash.
Seems to have suffered a catastrophic bird strike, which might sound nothing in the scheme of things, but actually, when you consider the powerful engines on board, any bird strike is very critical in a case like this. And that triggered a chain of events where the pilots could not keep in control. They could not deploy the landing gear in time. And then they ran out of runway effectively at that point. They skidded off the runway and they ran right into a wall. They have recovered one of the black boxes. Once they've recovered both black boxes, the investigation will begin properly.
The government says that ruthless criminals are responsible for the deaths of 3 migrants after a small boat capsized in the Channel this morning. A major rescue operation near Calais saved 45 people, with 4 still in hospital. Authorities warn the death toll could rise further. It follows news that over 1,300 migrants have now crossed the Channel since Christmas Day, despite the government's promise to smash the gangs behind the crossings. Labour is facing a countryside crisis as new polling has revealed that rural voters are angry over a planned tax raid on family farms. A poll in the Telegraph newspaper suggested that only 1 in 5 believe that Labour cares about countryside communities. Sir Keir Starmer's approval ratings among rural voters are being described now as catastrophic, with concerns mounting over his so-called family farm tax. The Prime Minister is also under pressure to address backlash after a major speech called his Plan for Change. The Education Secretary says that tax breaks for private schools are a luxury we can't afford ahead of a new policy coming into effect. Bridget Phillipson has defended the plan to end exemptions, claiming it will raise £1.8 billion each year to, she says, fund state schools and recruit more teachers. Critics, though, including the Conservatives, say it's a vindictive policy that will only hurt children's education. The government insists the policy is supported by middle-class parents who are struggling with private school fees and believe that better funding for state schools will improve life chances for everyone. And the UK has pledged millions more to help investigate Russian war crimes in Ukraine. The government's announced an additional £4.5 million to support bodies like the Ukrainian Prosecutor General's office in holding war criminals to account. It follows an earlier pledge of more than £6 million for war crime prosecutions. It comes as the United Nations has already confirmed war crimes have been taking place during the conflict, citing evidence of executions and of torture. Those are the latest headlines for now. Plenty more still to come. I'll be back with you in an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Good evening, hope you're well. Keir Starmer promised a government of transparency, but one of the biggest issues of our time is being carried out in secret. Labour rushed to complete a cloak and daggers handover of the Chagos Islands before Donald Trump takes office in January. And in October, they'd finally come to an agreement that saw us surrender the British overseas territory to Mauritius. Just for clarity, Mauritius has never owned these islands, and their only flimsy connection to them is that native Chagosians were sent there when the British kicked them out in 1968. Granted, it is a very complicated story that stretches back centuries, but the key issue here is that the islands are crucial to UK and US national security because it's home to the Diego Garcia naval base. Here's where it gets messy. Last month, the Mauritius government that agreed the surrender deal with Keir Starmer and David Lammy, they were defeated in a massive election landslide. And on Monday this week, their new administration pulled the plug completely on the old government's agreement, instead demanding even more money from British taxpayers to secure a 99-year lease on Diego Garcia. Up until now, the figure we've been asked to cough up by Mauritius has been kept secret. 100 million, 200 million, nobody knew, and Starmer's government hasn't divulged. That was until today. Tim Shipman, the chief political commentator at the Sunday Times, and his colleague Caroline Wheeler this morning dropped a bombshell piece that finally exposed how much British taxpayers could be fleeced for in the process of giving up their own valuable territory. Are you ready for this? The figure is £800 million a year. £800 million a year for as long as we want to keep the base, plus billions of pounds in reparations on top. Reparations aside, that's a staggering total of £79 billion for a 99-year lease being given to a country who we're stupidly handing over swathes of important land to. Unbelievable. One source told The Times today they wanted crazy money. They were talking £800 million a year for as long as we wanted to keep the base there, plus billions of pounds in reparations. It's unclear how much Labour and Keir Starmer and David Lammy will eventually agree to end up paying and how much of the bill the US will shoulder too. But at a time when British pensioners are freezing to death because this government saw them game for a shakedown of the winter fuel payment, even coughing up a fraction of that figure would be an unforgivable betrayal of Britain. The Prime Minister would also have absolutely no right to ever again mention a £22 billion black hole or his go-to excuse of difficult decisions ever again. And this wouldn't just be a betrayal of Britain either. As Shipman and Wheeler wrote in The Times today, it also sparks tensions between Britain and the United States. It is a secret deal which has huge implications for national security and global power dynamics, the rise of both China and India, and Western influence in the Indian Ocean for the next century. The International Court of Justice ruled in 2021 that Britain has no sovereignty over the Chagos Islands. I say, if Keir Starmer cared about this country, he'd stop the virtue signalling, tell the pointless and quite frankly toothless ICJ to do one and save up to £79 billion in the process. Let's get the thoughts of my panel now. The editor-at-large at the Mail on Sunday, Charlotte Griffiths, former Conservative MP Neil Parish, and the former Labour advisor, Susie Stride. Good evening to you all. Talking of strides, let me take a big one over here. You have to excuse me, I'm 3 lemsips deep so far. I'll sit over here to not share the germs. Neil Parish, let's ask you first. It was your former party who first ignited this deal. What do you think about this figure? I find it astonishing. It could end up something like £79 billion a year, £800 million, over the course of the lease, £800 million a year. That is atrocious, is it not?
Yeah, I think we do have to be careful what figure we agree. I think these islands are essential from a security point of view, and the Americans will also naturally contribute to it, but we don't know how much. And I think the other problem we've got is not just about this particular Chagos Islands. I think it's what happens with other bases we've got all across the world, and I just feel that if we're not careful, we're going to be held to ransom everywhere. So I think the figure that we finally agree, I think in some ways it's very difficult when the international courts decide that we don't have, we should not have sovereignty. But I think if we actually submit to the £800 million a year plus a lot of reparations, I think we will regret it.
Susie, why can't Keir Starmer just ignore the ICJ? Lots of other countries have before. They are pretty toothless. Someone described them as a crisp packet blowing in the wind. They've got no real authority. Why doesn't Starmer just stick up for Britain for once and say no?
I mean, this isn't about Keir Starmer or a Labour government. I mean, these talks began under the Conservatives. They began under Boris Johnson, then Liz Truss, James Cleverly. I mean, so, I don't know if he can actually say no because, part of, having respect in the international community is that you don't ignore courts like this. I think the UK government did go to trial or went to court twice over it, and both times it came back to say, actually, you need to give these these islands back. And I think there comes a point, doesn't it? I mean, look, it is very important that that American base stays there. That is really, really important. It is important, I think, the amount of money that is paid. I think it's important to say it's highly unlikely UK taxpayers are going to pay any of this, because the fact is this island is going to be for an American base. It's going to be Donald Trump and the Americans that are going to pay for that base. It's not our base.
I don't think they'll pay for it. Neil, any ideas on that?
We can't be certain that they're going to pay for it. I mean, I think they will certainly contribute towards it, because, of course, they've got huge interest in that part of the world because of the rise of China and all the problems surrounding that. So there is a real, Taiwan. All of those issues are very, very important. But we can't guarantee what the Americans will pay. That's the problem.
But there are also cables that are really valuable to us.
Yes, exactly.
Not the Americans. So actually,
with a lot of information coming, lot of information coming through there.
There were reports that I'm not sure if it's true. They'll probably remain secret. But apparently, GCHQ, our spooks this side of the pond, have very secretive cables under the ocean there, coming off the Chagos Islands.
Just seriously valuable, aren't they?
And of course, the other problem is, of course, the Mauritians could actually sort of negotiate a base with China instead. Now, I don't think they will, because I don't think they're close to China. But I think the problem we've got is like I said, it is a huge issue, and you're right to raise it. But what I'm more worried about is not only just here, but the rest of what we've got in many other parts of the world. Because you see, whether we still technically control other islands or not, naturally, the population of those islands will also be demanding much bigger sums for our bases to be there as well.
Can I put a theory out there? Okay,
yes.
So the best start to the new year would be if Keir Starmer stuck up for his country, backed out of the deal. He's got a great opportunity to back out of the deal. Yeah. Because the new Prime Minister of Mauritius has already sneered at us. You said it's about international respect.
It's not.
He said really sneeringly, he said, oh, the British are quibbling over money. It's 800 million quid, that year. Of course we're quibbling. And also, if he can carry on till January the 20th, Trump will throw it out anyway.
Yeah.
So I don't know if any of you watched Love Actually over Christmas. It's a bad deal.
Not for many years.
This is the moment Keir Starmer goes, this is a bad deal, and I'm throwing it out and standing
And also, Charlotte, isn't it the point, even if we're not shouldering the full £800 million a year, even if it's a fraction of that, right, say it's £5 million a year, that money could be better spent here in Britain. They're stitching up farmers for £500 million a year. They're stitching up pensioners for £1.5 billion a year. That money could be spent in Britain. And after all, can I just say, Neil, the ICJ ruled against Britain. Mauritius have never ever.
Yeah, I mean, I think Mauritius. I think that is the weakness of the whole argument of the International Court, is that Mauritius' claim to them is virtually nil. I would have thought.
But I also think,
that's the problem. I think David Cameron also, when he was Foreign Secretary, I believe, sort of called it in because
he said it was a joke as well.
Because of the sums.
I don't think whatever may be happening in regards to domestic policy, with farmers or whatnot, this is a different thing. It's very important that we have good security. It's really important that there are strategic bases in strategic places. This is not a Keir Starmer problem that was created by Keir Starmer. This is a problem. Yes, he is. He is in power. Absolutely, he is in power, and so it's incumbent upon him to make sure that he gets the best deal, because ultimately a deal is going to have to be struck.
He could just leave it alone. He could just back away. It's already been.
Charlotte actually got a very good point, because there's no doubt that when Trump comes into power in America in the new year, things will change, for better or for worse. And this is the sort of thing that I would think he would get his teeth into.
Starmer has a way out, I think, Susie. He has a way out. He has an off-ramp with Trump coming in. He can say, sorry, guys, David Lammy and I went over there, we tried our best, they had a new government, they wanted more money, Trump then came in, the clock ran out. Yeah. I just don't think he will. I think he enjoys going around the world, giving money away. I mean, we're giving reports today, we're giving £11 billion in foreign climate aid. I mean, for goodness sake, focus on this country. We are, in many aspects, on our knees. And he just goes, he even said by his own admission he prefers Davos to Westminster. So, I mean, that sums it up.
He could even just do it for himself, if not for the rest of the country. It would be a massive PR win for him to say, do you know what, I stuck up for my country and I'm back to work.
I'm going to be honest with you, PR win. The vast majority of British people, I'm sure some do care about this, but a lot of them probably are caring about other things. But when you say stick up, when you say stick up for this country, what, like making sure that people can get doctor's appointments, making sure that people's schools, have teachers. No, but it's really important, because when push comes to shove, what do do people care about? These are the things they care about, including sewage not being pumped into their rivers.
Sorry, you can't make that argument when all the time it's the arguments about money, and the next minute he's going around the world giving away our money. You see, so you cannot actually spend money twice, which this government.
I'd be intrigued to know whether James Cleverly would have got a better deal. Sorry, I'm just intrigued to know whether, like, James Cleverly would have got a better deal. Ultimately, this whole saga began under the Tories. You know, we're trying to finish it off. I mean, look, we don't know what's going to happen. Let's see what happens. Donald Trump is obviously going to change up everything.
Why doesn't he actually, you know, make a show of strength on it then? You know, it's a lovely one. You know, how long he will go on blaming the Tories, whether it be for the whole 5 years, I don't know. But it's not been that long yet. He can carry on doing it. But he has, some time or other, he's got to actually stand up and what does Keir Starmer actually believe in?
Hugh Grant in Love Actually.
Well, I mean, I don't know. I mean, look, I just also think, you know, there is something to be said that people were booted off their land. Do you know what I mean? That's what happened. British soldiers. Yes, that may well be true, but British soldiers turned up, booted them off their land, killed all their dogs.
We can't hear you at home when you're both talking over each other. Sorry. No problem. I was going to say, Keir Starmer, you could build new hospitals and schools and get GP places, Susie, if Keir Starmer wasn't giving away potentially up to £800 million a year away to Mauritius.
But look, I just don't.
Islands, so.
I mean, look, I'm definitely not an expert in the Chagos Islands, but I'm pretty sure we are not going to be the ones paying that. It is all about an American base. We know that island is all about an American base, so I don't think we're going to be footing that bill.
America are our closest allies, and I think we need to.
Yes, we don't want to.
Anyway, we move on. A bit of a gear shift. If you didn't get everything on your Christmas card list or Christmas present list rather this year, how about £50,000 in tax-free cash? It's our Great British giveaway, and it's our biggest prize we've given away to date. Here's the details you need to win.
There's still plenty of time to grab your chance to win our biggest cash prize ever, an incredible £50,000. What would you spend £50,000 on in the coming year? Spectacular holidays, a brand new car, home improvements, or maybe you'd just like to save it for a special occasion? For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 31st of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
All right, very good luck to you. That would be a very, very good way to kickstart your new year. Anyway, a shocking new poll has found that over half of Brits think next year, 2025, is going to be worse than 2024. What do you think about that? Can the Prime Minister, with that in mind, survive next year? Or will the likes of, I don't know, Wes Streeting, Angela Rayner, could they become Prime Minister? Former Labour spokesperson James Mathewson and media campaign manager at the Taxpayers Alliance, William Yarwood, go head-to-head on that next.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
Bansky's Girl with Balloon is arguably one of the artist's most recognisable images. So when a limited edition print signed by the artist was stolen from Grove Gallery in London, an investigation was launched by the Metropolitan Police's Flying Squad. The work was thankfully retrieved. The desire to own great works of art has once again become evident this week, albeit a little further afield on the continent. Police in Italy have uncovered a criminal network forging artworks by Bansky, Andy Warhol, Pablo Picasso and others. Investigators said that they've seized more than 2,100 fake pieces of art with a potential market value of about £165 million. With me to discuss that case is the Chief Executive of Grove Gallery, James Ryan.
The art world needs to tighten up. It is known as a bit of a Wild West out there because people will try and chance it with these forgeries. You're quite right, there's only one actual original, but even auction houses have been hoodwinked before.
The burglary that you suffered is sub judice, so we have to be careful what we say about it. But it must have been a bit of a shock to you. I mean, was it a broken window, a smashed door?
At 10, 11 o'clock at night, and just hammer straight through, shoulder barging through the door, and then in and out. You know, gone in 60 seconds. I must say, I know.
Obviously, they had a targeted attack. The person would have known what he or she was after. Yeah.
Absolutely. But I must say, I know they cop a lot of flack, the police force, but the flying squad got the artwork back within 3 days. They were fantastic. So yeah, I've never heard or seen, other than the Thomas Crown affair type film. You know, I just didn't think it'd be happening to little old me, you know, in Fitzrovia, but it did, and thankfully we got it back.
GB News.
This is Britain's newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get the book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Ben Leo Tonight, only on GB News. We'll head to our head-to-head in just a sec, but some breaking news from America over the past couple of minutes. Former US President Jimmy Carter has died at the age of 100. The one-term 39th president died on Sunday today after spending more than a year in a hospice. He was a Democrat, of course. He served in the White House between 1977 and 1981 before being beaten in a re-election bid by Republican Ronald Reagan in the 1980 election. There were pictures doing the rounds in the last couple of weeks. You probably saw them when he came out of his hospice, but Carter's death was confirmed by his son today. And the Georgia native was the oldest living president before his death earlier today. So just to repeat, the 39th US president rather, the one-term president, Jimmy Carter, has died today at the age of 100 in the United States. We move on now to our head-to-head, where the Prime Minister's been dealt with a severe blow tonight after a new poll revealed that half of Brits believe 2025 will be worse than this year. So only 23% believe next year will be better. That's according to the survey of more than 2,400 people by pollsters More in Common. And that comes on the same day that the first significant seat-by-seat analysis since the general election revealed Labour could be on track to lose nearly 200 seats at the next election. Since he became Prime Minister back in July, Keir Starmer's popularity has collapsed more significantly than any other Prime Minister in modern history. Some achievement. So tonight I'm asking, can the Prime Minister survive 2025? Let me know your thoughts by heading to gbnews.com/yoursay or tweet me at gbnews, and while you're there, vote in the poll. I'll bring you the results in just a few minutes. Going head-to-head on this now are the former Labour spokesperson James Matthewson and Media Campaigns Manager at the Taxpayers Alliance, William Yarwood. Good evening to you both. Thank you for your company. William, we'll start with you. Is 2025 going to be the year Keir Starmer moves aside for the likes of Angela Rayner, Wes Streeting, whoever it may be?
Well, good evening, Ben. I don't think so, actually. I think Keir Starmer will cling on for dear life. But even if he does go, I don't think there's only going to be any real change. I mean, Rayner, Reeves, Cooper and the rest of them all have the same kind of managerial elite ideology that Starmer holds, and I think would pursue the same policies, maybe with different flavours and maybe with different priorities. But I don't ultimately think that they'd be any different from Starmer as he's going currently. But whether next year is going to be worse than 2024, I certainly think that it might be, and it probably possibly will be, due to the fact that the employer's national insurance hike will take place, the fact that the family's farms tax will likely decimate hundreds of farms across the country, the fact that the government and the bureaucracy just continues to grow, with the fact that Labour, since they've been in power, have actually added to the size of quangos by one a day since they've been in power. So I don't think 2025 is going to be any better than this year. And unfortunately, whether we like it or not, whether Keir Starmer goes or not, we've got another 4 or 5 years of this Labour government.
Interesting. James, that's a pretty bad rap sheet from William there on Labour's first, 6 months in power.
It is. It's a real shame to hear William being so pessimistic about things when, we've got the start of a new government. We've got opportunity ahead of us. The world is in a very uncertain place right now, and there's a lot of uncertainty for a lot of people. I have no doubt that people are very scared, very, kind of concerned about what the next year ahead of us has. People have been through very difficult times in recent years, and politicians haven't helped with that. Politicians over the last, 20, 25 years have eroded trust gradually. In the British public are kind of paying the price of that. People all say politicians are all the same. Now, of course, they're not. As William's just rightly pointed out there, he's pointed out the ideology of the Labour Party, an ideology that he may disagree with, which is absolutely fine. But we had a democratic election. We have a mandate to govern. And Keir Starmer is the Prime Minister who was elected at that election. You can believe why
that's
that
fine.
election had
But
the
James,
result
his popularity, sorry to interrupt, his popularity has collapsed more than any other Prime Minister in modern history. So we're not saying Labour's out and Reform are in or any of that nonsense. But, there is a real prospect. Do you not agree that it could be Angela Rayner Prime Minister, Wes Streeting, whoever?
No, because it's not about Keir Starmer. It's about the government's challenges, and the government is taking on these challenges. The government is changing the way that the economy is managed in Britain. There are going to be many people who are unhappy.
Yeah, zero growth, inflation up.
Lots of vocal criticism, including from yourself, Ben. Lots of vocal criticism across the board from people because things are changing in this country, and certain people. And the kind of think tanks who represent them, the likes of William here, who's here to represent his think tank, those think tanks are all about trying to resist this change. And we'll see that change in the next 4 years gradually. But in the year ahead, hopefully we'll see lots of positive come out the Labour Party.
So, William, you're representative of the electorate, I guess. It's just you Tufton Street types who are just trying to cause unrest in the government.
Yeah, no different story than usual there, Ben. It's always us lot's fault. Look, I understand the point there. Labour does have a majority. It does have a mandate. They have a right to govern for the next 4 to 5 years. I agree with James on that point. But a lot of what he said there was just effectively words, politicians are, that people think they're all the same and this government's got a future to look forward to and, we're going to see the benefits of whatever Rachel Reeves is implementing. But quite frankly, we've already seen some of the so-called benefits, which is businesses are saying that they're not going to hire more either full-time employees or part-time employees. We're seeing the fact that the national insurance hike is likely going to be passed down onto consumers as well in the price of their goods. Just the other day, there was an announcement that a new net zero grocery tax would be implemented, which of course would make food in plastic packaging even more expensive, indeed making people
So what happens then, William? William, what happens then? So say Keir Starmer is completely rudderless. There's a plot inside the Labour Party. I can see it happening. Who would take over in your eyes?
Oh, I think it'd probably be a fight between Rayner, Reeves and Streeting, actually. And if I could just really say something on either of them, I think Streeting's probably the most interesting one out of the few because I do think that he has a genuine appetite for reform in the National Healthcare Service and across the state more broadly. Rayner, while she may be a decent person, might be a good fun and a night out per se, I don't think she perhaps has the same kind of, balanced, moderate approach to politics that maybe Starmer and some of the others have. But Reeves, I think actually she probably do more dangerous.
With all due respect to both of you in this discussion, neither of you have a clue about the internal operations of the Labour Party or how it functions. And what you've just said there proves that. Because those
James, I don't need to. I don't need to. You can look at the polling, look at the approval ratings, look at the growth. You guys are banging on about growth. Rachel Reeves said the word growth 39 times during the budget. It was 6 months in, you've had no growth. So the point being, James, what happens? What happens in summer next year? Hang on, James, let me answer this question. What happens in summer next year if there's still no growth, inflation's ticking up when the rest of the world is ticking down? What happens then? You're saying there's going to be no questions of Keir Starmer?
No, because it's not about Keir Starmer's leadership. The government's in this together. A lot of this has been driven by.
Come on, you sound like Comical Ali from Baghdad, just in the Labour version. Everything's fine.
There are no, as I see it, plots within the Labour Party. The Keir Starmer leadership of the Labour Party has been ruthless in dealing with factions in the Labour Party. Now, he has factions around him at the table in the cabinet, that's certain. But, you know, the likes of the trade union movement, who seem to be behind him on most of the policies, and some of these policies, by the way, have been so difficult for Labour MPs and trade unionists to swallow. Policies that I do not support, that have been brought in by the Treasury to try and balance the books.
I'm sure the trade unionists love the £14 billion pay hikes to train drivers. I'm sure that wasn't difficult to swallow.
No, money to work and people bet. And let me tell you, that's the one thing that we've seen from this government that changes everything. And of course, William's going to disagree with this because he's here to represent the other side of the coin. And what we've seen is change for workers in Britain, because finally workers are getting a fairer deal under the Labour Party, and bosses, they're not happy about it, as William demonstrates.
Unless you're a farmer, of course. James, thank you very much. And William, thank you for your company this evening. Merry Christmas. Do we still say Merry Christmas, or is it past the sale-by date? Happy New Year, anyway. One of the two, they'll work. So who do you agree with? Can Sir Keir Starmer survive 2025? Paul, on X, you say he must. We can't change leaders like our underwear. I think it's David on X says he can, considering the woeful lack of alternatives his party can produce. That was Elliot, sorry. He can survive. And whether he should is something else, you say, Elliot. And David, you've said neither Starmer nor Badenoch will be leading their party by next Christmas. I actually agree with you as well. I think both are on shaky ground at the moment. Your verdict is now in. 16% of you think Keir Starmer will survive 2025, while 84% of you say he won't. Now, you can join GB News for the ultimate countdown to 2025. Myself, Bev, Patrick, Emily and Darren, a right motley crew, will all be together for a very special show. GB News New Year's Live. That's 10 p.m. on New Year's Eve. We're going to have Prosecco, No Secco, which is the alcohol-free version, of course. Lots of nibbles. We'll be looking back on the year, our highlights of the year, our heroes, our villains. That's from 10 p.m. on New Year's Eve all the way through to 1 a.m. We'll have the fireworks, of course. Please join us. We'd love to have your company there. Coming up next.
I'm afraid to say the right honourable gentleman doesn't understand aspiration. He doesn't understand opportunity.
A new Wall Street Journal documentary has blamed the British civil service, or the blob, as former Prime Minister Liz Truss describes them, on her downfall. I'll be joined next by the man behind the documentary, the American filmmaker Michael Pack. Do not go anywhere.
Hello there, welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast. Well, as we move into 2025, the weather is certainly turning much more unsettled across the country. A risk of some disruption in places as areas of low pressure move in. But at the moment, we still have high pressure across the south, keeping things fairly settled here. But weather fronts already providing plenty of rain across Scotland. And if anything, as we go through the course of the evening, that rain intensifies across parts of Scotland. Also, could just see some snow beginning to fall across the higher ground. Further south, a fairly quiet night to come, albeit rather cloudy, but that cloud cover will generally give us a fairly mild night. Although some clearer skies across the very far south, we could see lows here of around 3 to 5 degrees. So if we start Monday morning across Scotland, it's going to be a wet and potentially snowy start for some of us. Warnings are in force right throughout Monday, and that will continue into New Year's Eve and potentially New Year's Day too. So if you do have any Hogmanay travel plans, do stay up to date with the latest warnings. The rain also beginning to move into parts of Northern Ireland and Northern England too, but the further south you are, generally a dry start with maybe a few glimmers of sunshine. But for most of us, really, it's going to be a fairly cloudy Monday. The best of any brightness really will be reserved across the far south. But even here, we could just see a few showers develop. But for Scotland especially, a very wet picture here, although the far northwest may well just turn a little bit drier as we move into the afternoon. Mild for most of us, but up across the far north, we're just starting to see this cold air just begin to move a bit further south. So a pretty cold afternoon to come for much of northern Scotland. Into the evening, another band of rain then begins to move into Scotland, so turning wet once again with, again, risk of some snow in places. Remaining fairly quiet for the time being across the south, but for all of us as we move into 2025, it's turning unsettled with the risk of some wind, rain and potentially snow.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, welcome back to Ben Leo Tonight. As we've been hearing just a few minutes ago, breaking news from America, former US President Jimmy Carter has died at the age of 100. The one-term 39th president died today after spending more than a year in a hospice. He was a Democrat, of course. He served in the White House between 1977 and 1981 before being beaten in a re-election bid by Republican Ronald Reagan in the 1980 election. Carter's death was confirmed by his son earlier today. Let's talk now by the American filmmaker Michael Pack. Good evening, Michael. You're here, of course, to talk about your great documentary on Liz Truss, but just a few words, if you can, before we get into that about Jimmy Carter. His son, Chip Carter, announced in a statement that his father was a hero, not only to me, but to everybody who believes in peace, human rights and unselfish love. Have you got any words or thoughts about your president?
Well, I interviewed President Carter for my documentary about Admiral Rickover, which is called Rickover, The Birth of Nuclear Power, available on Amazon. And he was extremely nice to me and extremely generous with his time. I don't really think he was a great president. I'm Jewish. I do not think his post-presidency equating of Israel with apartheid was very helpful either. But he was certainly a decent man, and as I say, very good to me personally.
Why wasn't he a good president? I mean, I'm reading, it was well before my era, of course, but I'm reading that his presidency was beset by economic and diplomatic crises. But what were they exactly?
Well, indeed, we had, stagflation, as they called it. We had both inflation and economic stagnation. And then it ended with a hostage crisis with all these Americans held hostage in Iran after the fall of the Shah. So it was a disaster in terms of economic and foreign policy terms, but actually in a way it's a little related to the Liz Truss documentary, if I may pull it back.
Nice segue.
She too is trying to deal with effectively stagflation in the British economy. It's how to get growth. And at that, Jimmy Carter's successor, Ronald Reagan, proposed a supply-side pro-growth policy, not unlike Margaret Thatcher and not unlike Liz Truss. So she's in the post-Jimmy Carter, Ronald Reagan, Thatcher camp.
OK, well, we're going to be going live to the US in the next hour, hopefully. Steve Edgington, our US reporter, will be there to talk more about Jimmy Carter. But the reason we've got you on, Michael, is this new documentary. Growth, of course, as you've said, was at the heart of Liz Truss's very brief time in power over here. She's the subject of a new documentary by yourself on the Wall Street Journal, which claims the blob played a pivotal role in her downfall. Let's take a quick look at the trailer.
My opinion, our economy is stagnating because taxes are too high, the government's too big, there's too much regulation, it's expensive to build anything, it's expensive to get energy, it's not surprising, it's uncompetitive to run a business.
I'm afraid to say the right honourable gentleman doesn't understand aspiration, he doesn't understand opportunity, he doesn't understand that people want to keep more of their own money.
Liz Truss clearly made...
So there we are, Michael. It's a how long is it? 30 minutes documentary. I watched it yesterday. What was it like making it? How long did it take? Where did you go for it? Where did you speak to Liz? Just give us some flavour about producing it.
Well, we shot it all in London, of course, even though we were based in the Washington, D.C. area. We were strongly influenced by and shaped by the Wall Street Journal correspondent or Wall Street Journal opinion writer in Washington, Joe Sternberg, who's written a lot about Liz Truss, including very frequently, the last few days, an op-ed on both this film and on Liz Truss's legacy. And it was, for me, a great experience. I did not know that much about British politics. I think I learned a lot. I've met a lot of people. We aspire to tell her story in a straightforward manner. We give her the chance to make the case that she was done in by the blob, the swamp, the administrative state. But we have many other points of view in the film, from Labour Party, from conservatives that don't agree with Liz Truss, from people inside her own cabinet. I mean, I'm going to express, if you ask me, my opinion here, but the documentary aims to be straightforward and factual.
Yeah, it was factual. It lays out the gilt yield situation, which is very interesting and quite relevant today because the 10-year gilt yield at the time after Liz Truss's mini-budget was at 4.1%. Today, under our new Labour government and our new Chancellor and our new Prime Minister, it's at 4.6%. But the interesting thing is, Michael, we don't have the same hysterical media reaction. We don't have the market spooks. We don't have the OBR, which is mentioned quite a bit in the documentary, calling for, urgent reaction. Why do you think that is? Is that the blob, the deep state in action?
I think so. I think, as you say, the Labour Party government now, and even her successor, Rishi Sunak, did not do any better with the economy, but she was the only one forced out. I think she had a radical Thatcherite program that the OBR and the Bank of England did not like, as well as she says in the documentary, wider than that, the entire administrative class. And we have that in the United States. I mean, we made this film in a way for an American audience. My partnership between my company, Palladium Pictures, and the Wall Street Journal is to cover issues and events that have been, from an American point of view, underreported or misunderstood. In the case of Americans, of both. In the case of Liz Truss. So I think, yes, I think that she was forced out for that reason. She had a radical proposal. She disagreed with the Keynesian orthodoxy, and they forced her out. Not to say that she didn't make mistakes. And many of them are illustrated in the documentary, and your viewers can decide whether they believe her or her critics.
Yeah, and I think what was evident in the documentary as well is that even though you're Prime Minister, in the UK at least, you have all these different independent, unelected, unaccountable quangos, as we call them over here. Labour starting a new quango every week, by the way, such as the OBR, such as the Bank of England and so on, who wield so much power and influence over you. So Liz was saying in the documentary, even the shameful thing was, the sad thing was that even though she had in her mind what she wanted to do with Kwasi Kwarteng and her team, as Prime Minister, she still couldn't get it through, which makes you think, how democratic is the UK and indeed the US with the blob and what you guys would call the swamp or the deep state swirling around?
I think that's right. I mean, I think she says in the film, and it's true, that this is a Western problem. It's very similar to what's going on in the United States. I served briefly in the first Trump administration. I experienced it personally. It was one of my motivations for making the film. I think that's right. You can be elected president or you're the legitimate prime minister and you can't govern. The other people in the bureaucracy just think you're wrong and they block what you want to do. And that is not a democratic outcome. In the United States, we say the administrative state is the unelected fourth branch of government, not in the Constitution. And that's a problem throughout the West. I mean, I believe in democracy. I mean, these things have, if you don't like a policy, you should elect somebody else, and that person should be allowed to govern by their lights and ideas.
Yeah, interesting. Just finally, how did you find Liz Truss personally? There were some quite emotive scenes where Kwasi Kwarteng was talking about the time he was called back from Washington into number 10, and Liz and their good friends, Liz Truss, had to sack him, and she did it tearfully whilst crying. How did you find Liz Truss personally?
I found her very open and expressive. I mean, she went into great detail about her personal feelings about these things. I think in a way, an emotional peak was when she talked about undoing everything that was in her mini budget when she brought in a new chancellor of the exchequer, and she said it was like presiding at your own funeral. I mean,
Jeremy Hunt, really,
Jeremy Hunt. That's right. And so she was very open, and I liked her. I will say that I liked every one of these British MPs and thinkers in the film. They were all extremely personable and smart, men and women. But I thought one of the things about the film is we particularly wanted to give Liz Truss a chance to get her point of view across. I noticed that the BBC documentary about her doesn't even give her a chance and doesn't even mention the LDI crisis. So This is a chance for her to get her point of view, but not only that across. And I think she did it very well in the documentary.
Yeah, OK, Michael, yeah, it's fascinating. I'd advise all our viewers to go and catch it if you can. Thank you, Michael Pack, for your company tonight. Appreciate it. And if you do want to watch the documentary at home, our viewers can go to free on the Wall Street Journal's website.
Exactly.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. Yeah, it's very interesting. I do feel sorry for Liz Truss. People like to say, oh, she increased my mortgage by £300 a year. I'd argue, no, she didn't. Interest rates were going up all over the world. In the US, mortgage rates went up to about 8-9% at their peak. So that wasn't solely down to Liz Truss. And as I said to Michael just there, 10-year gilt yields are at 4.6% today. After Liz Truss's mini budget in 2022, it was 4.1%. That was enough for the media and the OBR to basically call for her head. So what does that say? Should Rachel Reeves be out of a job? Anyway, we move on. Coming up next, it's been another tragic day in the Channel with 3 migrants sadly dying after they attempted to cross to the UK in a small boat. And just to add to the Prime Minister's woes, over 2/3 of Brits apparently think he'll fail in his pledge to smash the gangs. So is Keir Starmer really the man to end Britain's migrant crisis? That's next.
I hope it doesn't rain.
Don't worry about it.
It'll spoil our holiday.
Relax, we're totally covered.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Hello there. Conditions slowly improving across the far east of the Mediterranean, but the risk of showers across southern parts of Spain over the next 24 hours. Low pressure starting to pull away, but still the risk of some heavy showers for Cyprus, but generally dry across Greece, across into Italy. Sunny spells here, temperatures around average for the time of year, but the risk of some showers across southern Spain, and generally dry as well towards Tenerife there, reaching at 20 Celsius. Generally dry for the next few days, best of the sunshine towards eastern parts. See you.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
A Jaguar has ditched its growling big cat logo as part of what can only be described as a woke rebrand. The badge that has been used for decades, look at it, beautiful, on the bonnets of luxury cars has been swapped for a curved geometric J badge. They've also released a brand new advert, look at it, for their rebrand, which prompted Elon Musk to ask if the company actually sold cars. I thought this was a wind-up. It's not, it's true. And joining me now to discuss this is the motoring journalist, Amanda Stratton. Amanda, what on earth is going on at Jaguar? The car of James Bond, Batman, Arthur Daley has gone off the scale woke. Please make me make sense of it.
The E-Type is an absolutely iconic car, and it's important that people remember that, in fact, in its heyday, Jaguar was an incredibly prestigious brand, more so really than other British brands like Aston Martin, for example. But, you know, people in the industry are left sort of scratching their heads because you need to do something bold, you need to do something that catches people's attention, but you also need to stay true to who you are and what you are, and I'm not sure that this is it.
Amanda, that could be an advert for anything. It could be cat food. It could be Karl Lagerfeld. It could be literally anything apart from a Jag. Well, I mean, honestly, I mean, OK, we're talking about it. So we are talking about it, but we're not talking about it for the right reasons, are we?
And I think if I was going to be speculative here, I would like to think that this is actually all part of a cunning plan to get everybody talking about it. Yeah. So when they do launch the first new car that we're going to see, which, you know, people have been waiting, as I say, since 2001.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more.
Whether it's breaking royal news,
Will, please bring us up to date.
or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect And then you throw me into the mix, and trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Ben Leo tonight only on GB News. And French authorities have confirmed tonight that 3 migrants have died and dozens have been rescued after a small boat capsized whilst attempting to cross the English Channel from France. GB News revealed yesterday that 1,300 small boats had made the perilous journey since Christmas Day. That's unbelievable. 1,300. Can you believe that? And the latest tragedy in the Channel will be a fresh headache, of course, for the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, who has put his pledge to stop the small boats at the very heart of his government. But a new poll today revealed that well over 2/3 of Brits think he'll fail to deliver on that promise. I'm joined now by the Research Director at the Centre for Migration Control, Robert Bates. Good evening, Robert. First things first, will he fail or will he smash the gangs?
He will emphatically fail to stop the boats, because even were he to be incredibly successful in smashing the gangs, which the track record so far suggests he's not actually being so, that doesn't actually stop the boats. That doesn't stop the demand of those wanting to come to the UK. And as we all know, and has been discussed endlessly since the plan to smash the gangs was announced, that it doesn't actually make a difference, because as soon as you take out one gang leader, as soon as you start tackling one network, another simply jumps up into its place. We're now under Keir Starmer's premiership. I think the number of crossings have reached 25% higher than they were last year. So it seems from all the data, all the statistics, that the problem is actually getting worse. This was a problem that clearly started under the Conservatives, and 150,000 have now come since 2018. But Labour seem to be doing all they can to pour gasoline on this problem and to actually make it worse. And I'm in no doubt that next year we will actually see figures that we haven't seen before. We'll probably be breaking the 50,000 mark of people coming across in the next 12 months. It's a very, very bleak situation, and it's being handled woefully.
Oh, great. That's good to hear. Happy New Year. Goodness me. What do you make of the 1,300 who came over since Christmas Day? Why was that? Was the sea particularly calm over Christmas? I mean, what's going on there? That seems like an extraordinary number.
Yeah, so the figures this winter are extraordinary. We've never seen anything like them. We've never seen the number of crossings that we have seen in the last couple of weeks. And the reason why I think this is taking place is because the demand has actually gone up so high that those people traffickers, those bringing those people across on the boats, are becoming less scrupulous, because they've got more people coming to them saying, we would like to make this crossing. So in the incident that we saw today, tragic as it is really the consequence of Labour's mismanagement of this situation, the extension of a whole raft of pull factors that weren't in place during the Conservative government, the scrapping of any deterrent, the granting of an amnesty to all those that have broken into the country illegally. And really, the situation is getting worse, because the Labour government aren't sending a message to those that are trying to break into the country that they simply aren't welcome, and that if they do come to the country, they aren't going to be given the raft of benefits that they are being told at the moment that they will receive.
OK, Robert, in their defence, if I can provide some for balance, they would say, look, we've only been in 6 months. We've just about set up the Border Security Command, or whatever they're calling it. It's not enough time yet to judge us. They've got 4 more years. So is it not a bit premature to be saying that they've failed on this?
I think if you look at the rhetoric and the way that they've approached this issue, and I think it's anyone with common sense can see that if you remove a deterrent from the equation, it's one of the very fundamental things that you have to do if you want to stymie these flows, is you have to dissuade people from making these crossings. So yes, it might be too early to actually make judgments, and the data might not be clear enough yet, although there is a clear inclination that things have gone up. But the very fact that they have adopted such a different philosophical approach to the one that the Conservatives were adopting, anyone with a semblance of reason can see that that will inevitably lead to problems further down the line.
OK, Robert Bates, you are the Research Director at the Centre for Migration Control. Thank you very much. Coming up, a new mega polls put Labour on track to lose nearly 200 seats at the next election. Is it time for Reform and the Tories to put their squabbling to one side? Back in a tick.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast. Well, as we move towards the New Year period, the weather is going to be very unsettled. All of us seeing a spell of rain at times and also some strong winds, and in the north could also see some snow. Out there at the moment as we end the Sunday, still got high pressure in the south keeping things settled here, but weather fronts already across Scotland, and as we move through the course of the night, the rain here is going to intensify, some heavy and persistent rain developing, also some snow as it bumps up into some colder air, especially across the northern half of the country. Warnings do come into effect overnight and they'll continue right into the New Year period. So if you do have any travel plans, do stay up to date with the latest warnings. Elsewhere, it's a fairly quiet start to Monday, but as we zoom into Scotland, you can see plenty of rain and also some snow in places. So a very tricky start to the day here. And unfortunately, there's not going to be much improvement in parts of Scotland throughout the course of the day. Some rain also just knocking on the doorsteps of Northern Ireland, maybe some patchy rain also for Northern England. But for the rest of England and Wales, generally a dry start, albeit rather cloudy. But some breaks in the cloud will develop as the winds continue to freshen. Could come quite strong across parts of the Pennines. At times could see some buffeting on the roads here. But really the lion's share of the wind and rain will be across the north. Some colder air also beginning to seep further south across Scotland. So increasingly cold here with, again, risk of some winteriness in places. But further south, it's generally going to be another mild day. And then for New Year's Eve, a very unsettled picture across the north of the country. Further wind, snow and rain warnings in force here. Fairly dry initially across the south, but some of this rain will spread its way southeastwards as we go through the course of the day. After a very brief calmer interlude, maybe around the bells, another weather system moving in for New Year's Day, bringing a renewed risk of rain, wind and snow.
Despite the morning rain, it'll be a nice, warm, cosy day ahead. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
There's still plenty of time to grab your chance to win our biggest cash prize ever, an incredible £50,000. What would you spend £50,000 on in the coming year? Spectacular holidays, a brand new car, home improvements, or maybe you'd just like to save it for a special occasion? For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 31st of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Lee Anderson's Real World, Fridays from 7 p.m.
I'm joined with Ryan Mark Parsons, who's a TV personality, a columnist, and he was on The Apprentice a few years back, weren't you? That's where most people would recognise your face from. One of the youngest contenders ever on The Apprentice. How did that work out?
Well, you know what? I never in a million years thought I'd get on the show. I was 18 when I applied. There were about 6 months of auditions. It was intense. You met Lord Sugar's advisors, his lawyers, his business advisors. It was the most intense thing I've ever done. And I just thought, never in a million years am I going to get on the show as a teenager. And I got the call from the exec. And he was like, you're one of the 16 candidates. And it was just like, really? So I took a gap year. I've just finished my A-levels. I was working in Harrods before. And I just came up with this business idea, took it onto the show, and I got fired in the end. I lasted 8 weeks, which wasn't too bad. But
what was the business idea? Educate me.
A concierge, similar to companies like Velocity Black, quintessentially, that work with some of the private banks. It was similar to that. I was inspired by my time in Harrods, working with some of these ultra high net worth clients. So I just wrote a 40-page business plan like we all have to do. But I didn't make it to the interview, so I didn't get to talk about it. But no, it was a great experience, a very tough experience, but unforgettable.
So at a young age, how did that change your life at that age? Because you must have got recognised, starting to be recognised when you're going out and about town.
Yeah, I mean, it happened quite quickly because the adverts start rolling out on BBC One and then the shows go on air. It's once a week on a Wednesday. You're getting about 7 million people tuning in every week.
Yep, yep.
And yeah, it was surreal. It was surreal. And then suddenly you get invitations to things. You're going to premieres and it was a lot. It was a lot at a young age, and I obviously had no training for any of that. But I just embraced it, and I've had fun with it.
GB News, the People's Channel.
It's 10 p.m. I'm Ben Leo. Tonight, Kemi's still not apologised, but after a huge poll of 11,000 Brits shows Labour would lose 200 seats in a general election under a hung parliament, is it time for reform and the Tories to end the squabbling for the sake of the nation? Elsewhere, Ed Miliband's net zero vanity project will cost a staggering £37 billion of public money, including £11 billion in foreign climate aid. So, when are we getting that £300 reduction in our energy bills? The first of tomorrow's newspaper front pages are on the way, and tonight's panel are ready to go too. I'm joined by Editor-at-Large at the Mail on Sunday, Charlotte Griffiths, former Conservative MP Neil Parish, and the former Labour advisor Susie Stride. And it's been a tragic day for aviation. A plane crash in South Korea leaves 179 people dead. And some breaking news tonight. Former US President Jimmy Carter has died aged 100. Our US correspondent Steve Edgington will join us live from America at 10:30. But first, your news headlines with Sam Francis.
Very good evening to you. From the newsroom, the top story tonight. The Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, and the King have paid tribute to the victims of a plane crash in South Korea that killed all 179 passengers and most crew on board. The Boeing jet carrying 181 people skidded off the runway, crashed into a fence and caught fire after its landing gear failed to deploy. Emergency responders rescued 2 members of the crew, while investigators now consider factors like a possible bird strike that could have caused engine failure. While the crash is one of South Korea's deadliest, with only the tail of the aircraft now remaining recognisable. Earlier, travel and aviation expert Sally Gethin spoke to us about the events that led to the crash.
Seems to have suffered a catastrophic bird strike, which might sound nothing in the scheme of things, but actually, when you consider the powerful engines on board, any bird strike is very critical in a case like this. And that triggered a chain of events where the pilots could not keep in control. They could not deploy the landing gear in time. And then they ran out of runway effectively at that point. They skidded off the runway and they ran right into a wall. They have recovered one of the black boxes. Once they've recovered both black boxes, the investigation will begin properly.
The government says that ruthless criminals are responsible for the deaths of 3 migrants after a small boat capsized in the Channel this morning. A major rescue operation near Calais saved 45 people, with 4 still in hospital. Authorities warn the death toll could rise further. It follows news that over 1,300 migrants have now crossed the Channel since Christmas Day, despite the government's promise to smash the gangs behind the crossings. Labour is facing a countryside crisis as new polling has revealed that rural voters are angry over a planned tax raid on family farms. A poll in the Telegraph newspaper suggested that only 1 in 5 believe that Labour cares about countryside communities. Sir Keir Starmer's approval ratings among rural voters are being described now as catastrophic, with concerns mounting over his so-called family farm tax. The Prime Minister is also under pressure to address backlash after a major speech called his Plan for Change. The Education Secretary says that tax breaks for private schools are a luxury we can't afford ahead of a new policy coming into effect. Bridget Phillipson has defended the plan to end exemptions, claiming it will raise £1.8 billion each year to, she says, fund state schools and recruit more teachers. Critics, though, including the Conservatives, say it's a vindictive policy that will only hurt children's education. The government insists the policy is supported by middle-class parents who are struggling with private school fees and believe that better funding for state schools will improve life chances for everyone. And the UK has pledged millions more to help investigate Russian war crimes in Ukraine. The government's announced an additional £4.5 million to support bodies like the Ukrainian Prosecutor General's office in holding war criminals to account. It follows an earlier pledge of more than £6 million for war crime prosecutions. It comes as the United Nations has already confirmed war crimes have been taking place during the conflict, citing evidence of executions and of torture. Those are the latest headlines for now. Plenty more still to come. I'll be back with you in an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hello, welcome back. Now, I'm not going to bore you too much with the Kemi Badenoch-Nigel Farage row, I promise, but there are now calls for the Tories and Reform to stop the squabbling and make a New Year pledge to work together to get rid of this Labour government. That was exacerbated overnight with a bombshell new mega poll that showed Labour would lose nearly 200 seats if there was a general election called today. Constituency by constituency analysis points to a hung parliament with huge gains by Reform and 7 cabinet members losing seats, including Angela Rayner. Labour's loveless landslide in July would be dramatically butchered, with Keir Starmer's comrades losing 87 seats to the Conservatives and 67 to Reform. So here's the final seat count from that More in Common poll, which quizzed 11,000 people. Labour would win 228 seats, the Conservatives 222 and Reform 72. 7 cabinet ministers, as I said, would lose their seats, 6 of them to Reform, with Wes Streeting, the Health Secretary, losing Ilford North to an independent candidate. Others losing to Reform would include, as I said, Deputy PM Angela Rayner, the Home Secretary Yvette Cooper, the Defence Secretary John Healey, Energy Secretary Ed Miliband and the Education Secretary Bridget Phillipson and the Business Sec Jonathan Reynolds. So, panel, welcome back. Look, I don't want to talk about the Kemi-Nigel row too much, but do we need, or do they need rather, in light of this poll, Labour appearing to be on the ropes, do they need to sort their differences out and focus on holding this government to account? Neil?
I think they will get together in time, and I think they'll come to some sort of a deal, but I don't think yet. And I think what we've got to do now is, like you said, in Parliament, then Kemi has got to get to grips with Keir Starmer, because, I mean, I think the story, to be honest with you, in some ways, is not just about Reform and the Tories. It's about the way that, Keir Starmer got in with only 34% of people supporting the Labour Party, and now that's down to about 25%. And I think it must be hugely worrying for a Prime Minister who's only just got into power. And also, he overdid, how terrible things are, because actually people start to believe him. And, of course, economies are fragile things. And when people stop spending, stop investing, then you have a budget where they tax every business known to man. Then they wonder why they've got no growth and why nobody's got any confidence. So they've actually sort of spun themselves in a web that I don't see they can get themselves out of easily. Because the economy's not going to pick up, and unfortunately, I think people just don't really see much in Keir Starmer at all.
Yeah, indeed. And markets, as we know, the economy is built on sentiment. And when you talk the country down for so long and they lead up to a pretty harsh budget, I mean, what the hell do you expect is going to happen? Charlotte, what did you make of this row between Kemi and Nigel? It all seems a bit silly, but my point yesterday was that actually it shows perhaps maybe a character flaw of judgment on Kemi's behalf anyway, because the country, whether you're a Conservative supporter, a Reform supporter, a Lib Dem, whoever, a Green, we need serious opposition in the country, and it all just seems a bit silly when they're rowing about membership numbers. So do you think they need to come together and forget about it?
I don't think they need to formally do it, but what Ed Davey and Keir Starmer did in the build-up to the election in the summer was they kind of informally just started agreeing with each other, and in terms of pushing against the Tories. So all Kemi needs to do, really, is just focus on the Labour government. Just for the next 4 years, just slowly find loopholes and holes and push against it. But there's no point in kind of fighting with Farage. It's a waste of her time. And actually...
And letting Starmer off the hook.
And letting Starmer off the hook.
In the meantime,
she could even unilaterally create an electoral pact by just being nice, vaguely, about Farage. Because, actually, he's a bit of an old charmer. He'll respond quite well to that. And then they can just focus both of their energy on taking down Starmer. And what that mega poll shows is that, actually, Reform is quite a lot... They're neck and neck, Labour and Conservatives, but Reform's quite far behind. So she doesn't need to worry about Farage. She should turn her attention to Starmer and actually be a bit, why not compliment Farage every now and again? They're quite aligned on some issues.
So, Susie, as the Labour aficionado here, what do you think Sir Keir Starmer's thinking of this row between Reform and the Tories?
I mean, I don't know. I suppose, yeah. I mean, look, I think he's got lots of other things to be focusing on. He's running the country, isn't he? So, I mean, look, I kind of agree. I think the Conservatives, rightly should be concerned about Reform and Nigel Farage because, as we know, he's very good at what he does. And there's a lot of people in this country that think he's a man of the people and think that he's got his finger on the pulse and whatnot. And so I think it's right that, she does have concern about him. But, yeah, it doesn't seem wise to me. Ultimately, we are the ones in government. I don't think she's also doing that, like Prime Minister's questions. I don't, obsessively watch Kemi Badenoch, but I don't feel like she's doing a particularly good job at Prime Minister's questions, and not that I want her to,
I think that's the general consensus. She tried to take him to task on immigration the other day, and she was absolutely schooled because Keir Starmer just said, you're a fine one to talk about immigration, Tories. What about this poll, Susie, the mega poll? You're losing 200 seats, and if indeed the Tories and Reform did, get together and put their differences aside, they could have a coalition government.
Yeah, I look at this poll. I think it's what is it? It's 5 months off a general election, 4.5 months to 4.5 years to the next general election. I don't really particularly feel like it's that relevant. I think there's so much that's going to happen in the next 4.5 years. The fact is we were dealt a difficult hand. We have a difficult 5 months. Things are going to look very different in a year's time.
How are you dealt a difficult hand, can I ask?
Well, in every section of this country, from prisons being overcrowded to the NHS being in a mess to sewage being pumped into our rivers to a house building crisis, there are potholes in the road. Can't find anything good to say about the Tories. Hence why the British people decided quite assuredly that they didn't want a Tory government.
But what have you done since you've come in? You've put £25 billion worth of tax on business. You've actually targeted every private business in the country. Nobody's investing anymore because they're putting aside.
What about the £63 billion pledge?
And so therefore you can't build an economy on public sector alone. And you seem to think that you've decided that socialism at last will work. Well, I thought socialism had been.
Just so you know, I don't describe
socialism. Because you're destroying the goose that lays the golden egg that actually produces the money to pay for the public sector.
We've got 63 billion.
The economy.
We've got 63 billion pound. Pledged of investment into this country. We've been in 5 months.
Let me bring Charlotte. And Charlotte, what are you going to say?
5 months.
Just to say, the mega poll shows that it's actually going really, really badly for Starmer. So even though it's irrelevant, which is, I kind of agree that we're 4 years off an election, so it's a kind of crazy time to mega poll. But what it does show is that only 6 months after being elected, Keir Starmer is really struggling in the polls, and he's practically neck and neck with the Conservatives again. It's only been 6 months.
Yeah, but what I would say on that is, they're making a lot of difficult decisions now. But the fact is when we start building those homes, when we start turning around schools, when we start bringing down the waiting list, when people stop having sewage pumped into their rivers, all these different things. And the economy, as I say, is never just about numbers. It's also about how people feel.
Sorry, you've got to create wealth in order to spend wealth.
Absolutely.
And all this government's done since it's got into power is to squeeze the private sector, which is creating the wealth.
Right.
What you do if you want to grow the economy, you actually cut taxes in order for it to go forward.
Don't badmouth the economy.
And don't because you see, an economy is a very fragile beast, and if you keep on at people how terrible it is, stop spending, stop investing, and it all shrinks.
Susie,
and your economy's shrinking, you won't have the money to spend.
Let's see where we are in a few years' time.
I'll look forward to it, because I rather fear, politics aside, that this country is going to go downhill fast.
Way.
And it's all due to the new Chancellor. I'm sorry. That's where it is.
As I said to Michael Pack, the Wall Street Journal documentary maker, 10-year gilt yields now 4.6%, much higher than when Liz Truss was ousted. So why isn't Rachel Reeves out on her backside?
Exactly.
Susie, I was about to call you Lucy. Susie, can I just say? You said that they inherited a massive mess.
Yeah.
Labour inherited the fastest growing economy in the G7. interest rates falling, mortgages coming down, energy bills coming down, so you didn't inherit that.
I'm sorry, let's just be really clear. There's a reason why the British public across this country voted to get the Tories out. Because on housing, I'm going to speak on housing, on education, on the NHS, on immigration, which trebled under your lot, in every single sphere that you can look at. There was nowhere to look where there was any kind of success. And what I would say, 63 billion pound that's been invested, that has been pledged since Keir Starmer's come in. 5 months in, you can't mark a paper 5 months in. Let's see where we are. I'm sorry, it takes a long time to turn this great ship that is the UK government, the UK country around.
Why raise it during the whole general election? But once you've spent over £300 billion on COVID, rightly or wrongly, you are going to get inflation. The whole of Europe, the whole of the world had inflation. You can't actually lay that just at the Tories.
The best days of this nation are coming. Best days.
We got inflation down by the time you got into power.
Best days of the UK are coming.
Enough. Charlotte, would you like some earmuffs?
Yeah.
I'll get a producer to bring you some in.
I've got PTSD already.
For you, stuff in the middle.
Yeah, I'm sorry you're suffering, Charlotte. We'll try and make sure you don't suffer so much.
OK, thank you. We're going to move on. You can buy some very, very nice earmuffs indeed, because it's your chance to win £50,000 in tax-free cash in the Great British Giveaway. It's our biggest cash prize to date. Here's all the details you need to win.
There's still plenty of time to grab your chance to win our biggest cash prize ever, an incredible £50,000. What would you spend £50,000 on in the coming year? Spectacular holidays, a brand new car, home improvements, or maybe you'd just like to save it for a special occasion? For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 31st of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
All right, good luck. Coming up, analysis by the Mail on Sunday has uncovered the eye-watering taxpayer cost of Ed Miliband's net zero madness. It's a massive figure. You won't believe the number. I'll reveal all in just a tick.
I'm Patrick Christie's. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
So maybe people are opting for the more traditional ways of meeting people. Meeting organically.
It's the only way to actually... Well, I know some people have
it's worked very well for some people. I mean, I personally think that doing things more organically is probably going to be better, or it's more to my taste. It has worked well for lots of people.
So I absolutely agree. There's a very interesting young woman, she's about 22, who writes on this and has a podcast called Freya India. And she talks about this dating industry, and she said all she ever wanted to do as a teenager was go down the pub and meet a man and fall in love. And the dating apps just don't do that. And she said they've become so, it's just literally people looking for sex. We need to get back to traditional ways of meeting face to face, but we also need to stop toxifying it. A man flirting with a woman is not toxic. Men and women have done this for years. Obviously, we need to know about boundaries, but we also need to allow men and women to do what comes naturally.
I think it's also about spontaneity in society. It's much harder
to, you know, just randomly go out in an evening in London and not know what you're doing and have a good time than it was, I think, you know, 15 years ago or so.
Yeah,
and if you don't have spontaneity in your life in general terms, then that spontaneous meeting with someone is less likely.
So I think it's also where you are, because I was just thinking, as you said, that London, going out to try and meet someone in London is one thing. If you live in a small town and you go down your local pub, there's probably you're more likely to meet someone that you get to know over a period of time. And
but this is also why we need to support our pubs and our hospitality areas, because they are important social integrators. They really are.
Yeah.
GB News, the People's Channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
I'm Emily Carver. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back, Ben Lee tonight, only on GB News. Now, reports tonight suggest the Energy Secretary Ed Miliband's climate policies could cost the taxpayer an astonishing £37 billion over the course of the next Parliament. An audit by the Mail on Sunday has revealed that at least £37.4 billion of taxpayer money has been earmarked for his net zero march. The creation of Great British Energy will cost at least £8.3 billion, and Miliband has even promised to honour a 2019 Tory pledge to provide £11.6 billion for international climate funding by 2026. I could go on and on, to be fair, but let's speak now to the former Labour MP, Lloyd Russell Moyle. Good evening, Lloyd. Thank you for joining me. Last time I spoke to you, it got very feisty and you ended up shouting at me, so I hope we have some Christmas goodwill this time round. Look, let's start with this £11.6 billion in international climate funding. Fair enough if you want to achieve what I think is a deranged march to net zero for the UK. Why are we giving £12 billion away nearly to other countries when, quite frankly, we're skint?
Well, we've always had a commitment to international development and international aid. This figure is part of that figure. It's not separate from that figure. It's not additional to that figure. It's within the figure that everyone agrees that we should give to help countries develop, partly because then we can trade with them. And if you think about Uganda, where I visited very recently, a British company that supplies solar panels to projects in Uganda that we help subsidise, but provides a foot in the door to mean that the British company is the leading solar panel provider in Uganda and parts of Africa. Now, that is against direct competition of China, who we know are building huge numbers of solar panels and dominating the market. So it's good for British business and it's good for international development. That's why you do these things, because it makes sense in the end. If you look down that list...
But how long? How long is it going to take for us to get some sort of profit from Uganda? Decades, centuries?
Well, in fact, some of those companies are already making profits and providing jobs for Britain, and through the Commonwealth Development Corporation, the CDC, we have made rather large profits in the last few years that we've managed to reinvest into international aid. So it works particularly well. But let's look down that list of the Daily Mail that you mentioned. There's £2 billion there for the automotive industry. Now, I want a good automotive industry in this country, and under the Tories, Elon Musk's battery plant went to Germany, not to Britain. So we need to make sure that we are investing in the resources.
Yeah, Lloyd, look
can lead the way.
Look what's happening to the automotive industry here and in Germany. Germany, Volkswagen, I think, are closing all their plants because nobody wants electric vehicles. Over here, car makers such as Vauxhall aren't making petrol and diesel cars anymore because there's a specific ratio between petrol and EV cars, and if they're not allowed to make as many petrol cars if they're not selling EV cars, and because nobody wants electric vehicles, they're not making any cars at all. It's a complete joke, so that's not working.
Well, that's not quite true about Volkswagen shutting all their plants down, and let's not over-exaggerate the egg. And if you look at the Luton plant, which is a tragedy that is gone, and there needs to be more transitional and support, because there was no support from the government, they have shut that plant down. And these support measures will mean that that no longer happens. We inherited a system from the Conservatives that forced net zero, but didn't provide the resources to get there. These provide the resources to get there, and it means that Britain will be a world leader, we'll be able to sell our technology, and we will have another industrial revolution. You can't have a growth agenda, which Labour does, we do, under this new government, without investing. And this 37 billion that Ed Million's pledging will be matched by over 40 billion pounds in private investment and private money. That's how you get private money pouring into the country. We're matching it pound for pound, even more. In fact, it's so much better than just sitting back and doing nothing, isn't it?
I bet the likes of BlackRock and Vanguard are rubbing their hands with glee, talking about giving subsidies to people. If renewables are so cheap, why are British people being forced to subsidise renewables to the tune of over £90 billion over the last decade? That's £300 per household.
Well, there are some renewables that have had to come online, and we have subsidised them. It's quite right. In fact, moving to a situation where houses can access solar panels and you can have batteries, a technology which means that most of our housing stock in this country could be almost off-grid now, providing their own energy and allowing the power stations of this country to power our industry, which is what we need it to do. That, in the long run, has been good because it's driven down prices and it's made it affordable.
Still be good for bill payers.
We could remove some of the subsidies from some solar panels only a few years ago because those systems had worked in driving down the cost. Now, is it perfect? No. Would I like to do it without subsidy? Of course, but we have to live in the real world. And to get money, to get business, you have to support it.
I'll tell you who it's been good for. It's been good for renewable corporates and their shareholders getting massive dividends, all abroad, by the way, none in the UK, or very few, if any. And do you know who pays for it? Bill payers in the United Kingdom, who have the most expensive electricity prices in the world, £90 billion of subsidies, £300 each to their household bills. And by the way, Lloyd...
That's because we have a deregulated market system. The only other country that has such large bills like we do is New Zealand, that also has an unregulated market. And we, Labour, are introducing Great British Energy to stop that system where you're paying the international price rather than the domestic price of energy, and we can start getting those energy prices down again. You can't turn the ship around overnight. I think the public know that, but it has gone terribly wrong. I totally agree with you. Under the market-led approach from the Conservatives, where they didn't care about the country, they just sold off all the assets. Quite right, quite wrong that was, and Labour's turning that ship around.
Well, hopefully. Look, new analysis shows that the net zero march will create more than 170,000 jobs. Not here, Lloyd. Not in Great Britain, in China. They are, of course, the world's biggest manufacturer of wind turbines. Labour's got a big push for wind turbines in the UK. Why doesn't Labour employ British steelmakers to make those wind turbines? Because that's the bulk of the manufacturing. It's tons, thousands of tons of steel in these wind turbines. Why are we sending it to China and not to British Steel?
That's a really good question. And at the moment, China subsidises their steel, so it's cheap. And of course, our steel producers can't compete against it. And our steel producers want to move to a hydrogen-based steel production, which is possible. And France is moving towards that, but it does take resources to do it. So that's why Labour is putting £2 billion into hydrogen projects, so that we can get away from the dirty steel of China. And we do need to seriously look at carbon adjustments at the border, which is what Europe, Britain and America are going to do to start combating the Chinese dumping. But in the past, our previous Conservative government has totally let us down.
Stop banging about the Tories.
They let all the wind farm manufacturers go out of this country. We need to rebuild it up, and that's exactly what Labour is doing. You should be welcoming these figures because they will build British business back up.
Yeah, Lloyd, it's not what they're doing. They're giving 170,000 jobs to China when they could be giving the jobs to steelmakers here, to wind turbine manufacturers here. So that's not what they're doing. It's the complete opposite.
No. Temporarily, there will have to be, because we don't have the tooling and factories here at the moment, so we will, of course, have to source steel from around the world. But the £2 billion in hydrogen projects will allow us to be developing more hydrogen-based steel here and eventually be able to produce full wind farms here.
Yeah, all right. It just seems to be, this will happen when, this will happen then, just give us a bit of time.
We're starting the process now. We've only been in power for 6-7 months.
Well, you've had 14 years to get ready for it. Lord Russell Moyle, thank you very much. Appreciate your company. Happy New Year to you.
Thank you. Happy New Year.
Thank you. That was a bit more amicable than last time. Anyway, moving on, you can join us to kickstart 2025 live on GB News for the ultimate countdown to New Year. It'll be me, Bev, Patrick, Emily and Darren all together for a very special show. GB News New Year's Live. That's from 10 p.m. to 1 a.m. on New Year's Eve. We'll have Prosecco, No Secco, the alcoholic-free version, cocktails, mocktails, A few nibbles, crowning our heroes and villains of the year, all that kind of thing, and looking back on some of the year's best highlights as well. So that's New Year's Eve, 10 till 1 a.m. We'd love to have your company. Coming up, I'll be bringing you tomorrow's newspaper front pages hot off the press with my panel. There's some big stories on the front pages you won't want to miss. This is Ben Leo Tonight, only on GB News.
Hello there, welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast. Well, as we move into 2025, the weather is certainly turning much more unsettled across the country. A risk of some disruption in places as areas of low pressure move in. But at the moment, we still have high pressure across the south, keeping things fairly settled here. But weather fronts already providing plenty of rain across Scotland. And if anything, as we go through the course of the evening, that rain intensifies across parts of Scotland. Also, could just see some snow beginning to fall across the higher ground. Further south, a fairly quiet night to come, albeit rather cloudy, but that cloud cover will generally give us a fairly mild night. Although some clearer skies across the very far south, we could see lows here of around 3 to 5 degrees. So if we start Monday morning across Scotland, it's going to be a wet and potentially snowy start for some of us. Warnings are in force right throughout Monday, and that will continue into New Year's Eve and potentially New Year's Day too. So if you do have any Hogmanay travel plans, do stay up to date with the latest warnings. The rain also beginning to move into parts of Northern Ireland and Northern England too, but the further south you are, generally a dry start with maybe a few glimmers of sunshine. But for most of us, really, it's going to be a fairly cloudy Monday. The best of any brightness really will be reserved across the far south. But even here, we could just see a few showers develop. But for Scotland especially, a very wet picture here, although the far northwest may well just turn a little bit drier as we move into the afternoon. Mild for most of us, but up across the far north, we're just starting to see this cold air just begin to move a bit further south. So a pretty cold afternoon to come for much of northern Scotland. Into the evening, another band of rain then begins to move into Scotland, so turning wet once again with, risk of some snow in places. Remaining fairly quiet for the time being across the south, but for all of us as we move into 2025, it's turning unsettled with the risk of some wind, rain and potentially snow.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, Will, please bring us up to date. Or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together and what have we got, in my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Ben Leo Tonight, only on GB News. The very first front pages have just dropped, and we can start with the I newspaper. Labour's plan won't ease cost of living squeeze, voters warn PM. This is a new Survation poll of 2,000 Brits who say that they won't feel better off, they predict, under Labour's plans. The Daily Express, beware risks of weight loss drugs bought online, talking about things such as Ozempic, how do you pronounce it, Wegovy? The jabs to lose weight. Apparently there's lots of fakes and scams doing the rounds. The Guardian, safety checks ordered amid fears of defects in thousands of schools. An exclusive investigation into structural concerns over post-war buildings. And The Times, a rising toll of young adults too ill to work. More women under 25 have long-term sickness than are looking after their children full-time. And, of course, the big news breaking tonight, Jimmy Carter, the 39th President of the United States, who served from 97 to 81, and he did go on to win the Nobel Peace Prize. He has died today, aged 100. I think we can go live to the US now to get some more on that with our US reporter, Steve Edgington. Steve, good evening. Are you with me?
Ben.
Evening, Steve. What's the latest? Oh, we've got a camera instead. What's the latest with Jimmy Carter? Some sad news. He, of course, lost out eventually in his re-election bid to Ronald Reagan. What's the mood like over in the States?
Yeah, I think any time a president dies, it's a very sad moment for America. As you said, Jimmy Carter was president for one term in the 1970s. He's died age 100, pretty extraordinary number to live to. I think he's the oldest president to have ever lived. And he became president when he was just 52 years old, so almost 50 years ago. And his presidency was pretty controversial. He did lose in a landslide to Ronald Reagan. He was seen as a fairly weak president. He oversaw a terrible hostage crisis in Iran, rampant inflation in the United States. A lot of people criticized him for his economic policies and for just generally being weak on the world stage. Now, his supporters would say that he did sign a historic peace deal between Israel and Egypt, and he never shot a bullet in fire in anger. Sorry, so he was a pretty peaceful president from that perspective. He didn't start a war. So Jimmy Carter's legacy is pretty mixed. After he was president, he did a lot of work for charity all around the world, and I think his legacy, particularly after he left the White House, is seen as a very, very positive one, particularly works in Africa and all around the world supporting, various different charities and initiatives.
Yes, and Donald Trump has come out and paid tribute in the last half an hour or so. He said the challenges Jimmy faced as president came at a pivotal time for our country, and he did everything in his power to improve the lives of all Americans. For that, we all owe him a debt of gratitude. I guess it's quite sad. Steve, did you see those pictures of Jimmy Carter being wheeled out of his hospice a few weeks back?
Yeah, I mean, it was a very sad moment looking at those pictures and those videos because he obviously was incredibly unwell. He was very, very old. And I think it was just it's quite a tragic thing to look at a man. He's obviously very, very ill, or he was. And there's some interesting links between Trump actually and Jimmy Carter. Jimmy Carter was the president who handed over the Panama Canal to Panama. And Trump is now saying that he wants to retake the canal for the United States. Obviously, the United States built that canal a very long time ago. And Jimmy Carter was actually the president that gave that canal away to Panama. So there's some interesting links. Also, the discussions about inflation. His presidency had huge inflation because of oil shocks, particularly due to the crisis in Iran, the Iranian Revolution in 1979. So there's some really interesting parallels to Jimmy Carter's presidency and the situation today. When you had Joe Biden, we just had 4 years of Biden, but there's also been lots of inflation and chaos around the world. Lots of people accuse Joe Biden of being a weak president. Jimmy Carter was also obsessed with renewable energy. He was famously the president who put solar panels on the White House. He loved to wear this knitted sweater around the White House. I don't think he was a particularly charismatic man. He was a more introverted president, perhaps completely opposite to Donald Trump. So it's always nice to see a bit of bipartisanship. And I think particularly, as I said, when any president dies, it's a very sad moment for America.
Yeah, indeed. Stephen, thank you very much for that. Appreciate it. Jimmy Carter's son, Chip Carter, who broke the news earlier today, he paid tribute to his father. He said, "My dad was a hero, not only to me, but to everybody who believes in peace, human rights and unselfish love. The world is our family because of the way he brought people together, and we thank you for honouring his memory by continuing to live these shared beliefs." And Donald Trump, if I just continue what he said earlier, he added, "I just heard of the news about the passing of President Jimmy Carter. Those of us who have been fortunate to have served as president understand this is a very exclusive club, and we can only relate to the enormous responsibility of leading the greatest nation in history. Melania and I are thinking warmly of the Carter family and their loved ones during this difficult time. We urge everybody to keep them in their hearts and prayers." My panel are back with me now. Neil Parish, Charlotte Griffiths, Susie Stride. Welcome back. Your memories of Jimmy Carter?
Yeah, I remember him being elected. I remember they made much of the fact that he was a peanut farmer. He had a very strong southern accent, a southern drawl. I think, typical of many politicians, they think more of you after you leave than when you were president. And in some ways, I think he's better known now for the human rights stuff he did, the man of peace work he did after, because he had a very difficult difficult time as president, a lot of inflation, and America was not doing at all well. And so I think, but he will be remembered for a bit. I think he's a thoroughly decent man, and I think not terribly charismatic, but, you know, I think he's somebody that you could have trusted, and I think, like I said, he did an awful lot of work after he was president. But I think in many ways, as an American president, he didn't have that sort of zing that you probably needed, and I think that's why partly he didn't get his second term either.
Yeah, Charlotte, probably like me, a bit before my time, really, Jimmy Carter.
I love being able to say
you were also
he
young
was
here on the
president before I was born.
Yeah.
I mean, I think he was quite well known for this, the helicopter situation where the helicopters crashed on the way to rescue the Syrians.
That's right, that was all very bad. Yeah.
But, yeah, I don't know that much about him, except that, you know, pretty amazingly, he won the Nobel Peace Prize.
Yeah, and the fact he was the longest living president. He's lasted longer than any other previous president.
Yeah, and just to say, I mean, basically with that hostage situation, my understanding is that actually there was a big storm in the desert, which actually is why the helicopter crashed. You know, so in some ways, you know, bless him. Yeah. You know, and it sounds like he was a great man. You know, he won. You know, there's not many people, is there, that, you know, after he was president, he then won the Nobel Peace Prize for all of his work. You know, on a whole lot of humanitarian issues. Interestingly, someone texted me and said, actually, we're to thank him for budget airlines because it was because of his work that basically brought, you know, basically affordable air tickets, you know, which is important.
Yeah, he was an eco president.
He was. You see him before his time, really, in many ways. And of course, I think he did do a lot of genuine work. And I don't think he was a president, you know, that when he left office looked to make big money either, if you see what I mean. So I think he very much went out actually to help the world and help people. So I think we should remember him for that, perhaps, and not just only the fact that he was president for only 4 years.
Well, our best wishes are, of course, with Jimmy Carter's family tonight. But sticking with the theme of air travel, our hearts also go out tonight to South Korea, where this absolutely devastating plane crash has claimed the lives of 179 people, including, very sadly, a 3-year-old child. The tragedy has sent shockwaves all around the world, and these are live pictures now of the clean-up operation at Hwang Airport in South Korea. The King Charles, has spoken tonight on the disaster. He's expressed his deep sorrow, calling the loss profoundly saddening. He offered prayers and condolences to the families and loved ones mourning their unimaginable loss, and the dramatic footage captured. I don't know if you guys have seen the clips doing the rounds online today, but they captured the final moments as the Boeing jet landed without its wheels. The landing gear wasn't down. It skidded on its belly down the runway before bursting into flames after hitting a wall. Amid the chaos, 2 crew members were miraculously pulled to safety. And it's really, if you've seen the footage, it's unbelievable to know, to see that anybody survived that. And officials confirm they remain conscious and are receiving medical care. As investigators piece together what went wrong, bird strikes and adverse weather conditions are emerging as possible causes. Though, Neil, I did see, as we keep watching these live images, I did see a report earlier from some experts, some aviation experts, saying that it's not, even if it was a bird strike, the fact that the landing gear wasn't down wouldn't have caused that problem.
Yeah, I mean, I think naturally, I think it was a Boeing aircraft, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I think they will have to sort of thoroughly investigate it. I mean, it's just so tragic when these things happen. And of course, you know, you lose so many so quickly in. I suppose if you know, look at it, the amount of air travel there is in the world, they're probably, you know, it's a very unfortunate this happens, but probably not a huge number of crashes, believe it or not. But they've just come now all on top of each other. And Boeing lately has had a real problem, unfortunately, with some of its safety records. So I think, you know, I would just ask Boeing really to look at this very seriously, because it needs to be sorted, because all of us who are flying around, we do actually need to know that these aircraft are safe.
Well, there was another crash in, where was it? Was it Canada? Another Boeing 737, the same aircraft crashing, or at least coming into trouble within 24 hours. And, of course, the 737 MAX was grounded for 20-odd months. I mean, that Boeing situation, there's documentaries about it on Netflix.
They kept losing doors and all sorts off the, you know, out of the planes, didn't they? You know, so, I mean, all of these things need to be sorted, I think.
One thing I would say is, why was there a concrete wall at the end of the runway? Because I thought you had field and then another field and then another field at the end of a runway. Because you did get the impression watching it that if it just skidded along, I mean, it didn't look like it was in good shape or anything, but it might have actually not exploded if it hadn't hit the brick wall.
I mean, I think some of these sort of airdromes and airports, probably again that also needs looking at. You're right, you know, because I think sometimes, and of course sometimes they're built in very tight areas as well.
OK, but Boeing of course would deny they had anything to do with the crash. They did release a statement saying, "We express our deepest condolences to the families who love lost ones, and our thoughts remain with the passengers and crew." A spokesperson said that they would be working with the South Korean authorities to establish what's happened. Right, coming up, I'll be crowning today's Greatest Britain and Union Jackass, and we'll have more of tomorrow's newspaper front pages. This is Ben Leo Tonight, only on GB News.
I forecast a perfect holiday in the sun.
Weather looking good then?
For sure, and no worries about our travel insurance.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Hello there. Conditions slowly improving across the far east of the Mediterranean, but the risk of showers across southern parts of Spain over the next 24 hours. Low pressure starting to pull away, but still the risk of some heavy showers for Cyprus, but generally dry across Greece, across into Italy. Sunny spells here, temperatures around average for the time of year, but the risk of some showers across southern Spain, and generally dry as well towards Tenerife there, reaching 20 Celsius. Generally dry for the next few days, best of the sunshine towards eastern parts. See you.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
Phil Kearsey is bringing a new flavour to the Michelin-starred restaurant Pied à Terre as he becomes its new executive head chef. Customers can expect a menu that showcases modern British cooking, accompanied by classical French roots, which uses hyper-seasonal ingredients. What are hyper-seasonal ingredients? That's an interesting phrase.
It's more about just reacting to the seasonality of everything. We like to change the menu all the time. So basically, I surround myself with the best suppliers, and they tell me what's amazing at the moment, and then we try and celebrate that in the restaurant in many different forms, using taste, texture, and technique, and just try and celebrate something as humble as a broccoli stem or a cauliflower, using absolutely everything, and making sure we've got an ever-changing menu. So letting the seasons dictate, so it's never boring and we never get menu fatigue.
OK, your career has taken you around the world a bit.
Yeah.
For example, you were in the United States. What did you learn there?
So, well, every chef I've worked for, it's about to take something from. A lot of chefs will go places and just stay in one establishment and get to the top, and then that's it. I've kind of then went to another chef to learn completely different things. That's the brilliant thing, to be able to surround myself with such amazing chefs throughout my career, because I've learned different things from all of them. And you find out 5 different ways to do something, and you find the way that you like it the best. And it's also about understanding it takes a while to understand how the restaurant is, going through the history of all these amazing chefs that have been before me, the style, because it needs to make sense. You wouldn't have a dish that should be at the Fat Duck and then a dish that should be at the Waterside, you know. You need to make sure that it all makes sense and it goes together with the decor, the service, the wine serving. And so we want to be the restaurant, not that does a little bit of everything. We want to be the best French restaurant in London, you know.
GB News, the People's Channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking, this is a nightmare for the Conservatives again. Down to earth. It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it? And most importantly, honest. Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them. Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
We're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello, welcome back to Ben Leo Tonight. More front pages have just dropped. We're going to start with the Daily Star. Vladi horrible, it says. Colder than Moscow at New Year as polar plunge brings snow and chaos. If you're going out for a New Year's, knees up, take a coat and some gloves. The Sun, is that next? Michelle, we're having a baby. Look, I'm not a massive showbiz person, but I was quite pleased to see this. Michelle Keegan, the actress, and Mark Wright today confirms they're expecting their first child. It's come after a long time trying, I believe, so I'm very happy for them. The Daily Mirror, end cosmetic ops carnage, calls for new rules so only medics can perform procedures. And yeah, the Daily Telegraph, which we don't have just yet, a very interesting story, panel. I mean, I had my head in my hands reading this. Labour to diversify the national curriculum. The Education Secretary, Bridget Phillipson, is to review, to decolonise subjects that are seen as too monocultural. So the Telegraph can reveal the DfE, Department of Education, wants to create a curriculum that reflects the diversities of our society and helps produce young people who appreciate the diversity of Britain. Included in that is a, here we go, warns that a particular ethnicity and sexual orientation are underrepresented in the national curriculum. And the Daily Telegraph has also seen suggestions for changes that have been submitted for review by unions on how to decolonise subjects, as I said, that have been branded too monocultural. I'm sorry, this is absolutely bonkers, Charlotte. What the hell are they talking about?
It's insane. I mean, the idea that sexual orientation... I grew up reading sort of Jane Austen and stuff at school. I mean, obviously, Jane Austen doesn't have lots of gay characters. And the other thing that really annoys me is that recently, you know, they cut the Latin provision, which costs £4 million a year, nothing. And they took that away from schools to save money, Rachel Reeves and Starmer. So that now State Store kids can't learn Latin if they want to. But they have to learn about sexual orientation in their classroom.
So, Neil, what do you think colonisation in the curriculum means? What, banging on about white guilt and slavery, or what?
Yeah, we spend, you know, we've already started, and it's going to get worse, looking through all our books, deciding what books can be read at school, and also actually taking lots of passages and sentences out of books. I mean, the whole thing is just really trying to manage our history. Yeah. We had a history. We were a colonial power, and we did make mistakes. But for goodness sake, we are also this country of diversity because of it. And so can't we actually celebrate that rather than just sort of going through our books and our schools? And as Charlotte said, as far as sexual orientation is concerned, this has gone crazy in schools.
Yeah, I mean, personally...
crazy enough under the Tory party, but what is...
I mean, look, personally, I think we do need to celebrate far more, actually, the heritage of this country. For example, I'm from the East End, you know, where, you know, the first trade union and Shaftesbury and Dr Barnardo's first ragged school, Toynbee Hall, the first community centre in the world. And, you know, that will not be taught in schools. And I don't agree with this kind of, you know, negative teaching of history. But the underrepresented groups, for me, it's always going to be working class people more than these other groups.
Well, it says here there's going to be a more diverse material in classrooms, particularly in majority white classrooms, and a move away from English literature, which is seen as traditional. Do you know what I think of that? Rubbish.
All English literature is traditional.
Yes.
Right, let's move on to Greatest Britain Union Jackass. Neil, your Greatest Britain tonight, please.
Is the King. I think he's managed to keep going through cancer, and I really am very keen, you know, to endorse him as a Great Britain.
OK, great. Charlotte?
Mine is Judi Dench, who was remembering her friend Maggie Smith.
Yes.
And let's just, you know, remember that we've got a few legends still knocking around, including Judi Dench. And very sweet to be reminded of Maggie.
Love her. Susie?
And mine is Keir Starmer, because obviously, very sadly, he's just lost his son. Not his son, his brother. And, yeah, and I just think, you know, he didn't try to make a big thing of that. And just in the midst of all the, I don't know, awfulness, actually, he gets from the right-wing press, he was visiting his brother, not making a big deal out of that. And, yeah.
Yeah, OK. Well, thoughts with the Starmer family. I can't imagine the pain he's going through for losing his brother. Very, very sad. He's not going to be the Greatest Britain for that. But the King is, King Charles. He's had a good year. I wish he'd toned down the multiculturalism, wokeism a little bit, but your Union Jackass, please.
Well, that's Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, because she has actually brought all these policies in that are actually going to shrink the economy and actually make a lot of people worse off, and including farmers and everybody else have had to deal with her taxes.
OK. Charlotte?
Mine is Sadiq Khan, who's ordered a new report, which we'll read all about in January, which is expected to call for a major liberalisation of cannabis. It will be like New York in no time, and it's going to be a disaster. London's already on its knees. This is the last thing we need.
It stinks. It's everywhere. Susie?
And mine is all the Conservatives who, you know, benefited from the COVID, you know, what do you want to call it, all the contracts that were given to their mates, and they made millions of pounds. And actually, what an appalling thing to do in the middle of a pandemic.
We're running out of time, unfortunately. It's going to be Sadiq Khan. I don't agree with cannabis, really, in the streets. I think it makes people lazy and dumb. But anyway, he's our union jackass tonight. Thank you, panel. Up next is Headliners with Simon Evans. Simon, what's in store?
Hello, Ben. Well, we'll be looking back at Jimmy Carter, of course. 100 years of age he has left us. And I remember well his presidency, which was a mixed bag. Remarkably, he took it as a vaulting off point and elevated himself higher and higher, and in the ensuing 50 years became an all-time legend. So that's the start, and the rest is the news.
Thanks, Simon. Cracking show. Neil, thank you very much. Charlotte, Susie, appreciate your company this evening. Thank you very much. Thank you at home for your company. Have a great week from tomorrow, and I'll be back next week. Good night.
Thank you.
A nice bright morning will generate a lovely warm day, right through to the evening. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast. Well, as we move towards the New Year period, the weather is going to be very unsettled. All of us seeing a spell of rain at times and also some strong winds, and in the north could also see some snow. Out there at the moment as we end the Sunday, still got high pressure in the south keeping things settled here, but weather fronts already across Scotland, and as we move through the course of the night, the rain here is going to intensify, some heavy and persistent rain developing, also some snow as it bumps up into some colder air, especially across the northern half of the country. Warnings do come into effect overnight, and they'll continue right into the New Year period. So if you do have any travel plans, do stay up to date with the latest warnings. Elsewhere, it's a fairly quiet start to Monday, but as we zoom into Scotland, you can see plenty of rain and also some snow in places. So a very tricky start to the day here, and unfortunately, there's not going to be much improvement in parts of Scotland throughout the course of the day. Some rain also just knocking on the doorsteps of Northern Ireland, maybe some patchy rain also for Northern England. But for the rest of England and Wales, generally a dry start, albeit rather cloudy. But some breaks in the cloud will develop as the winds continue to freshen. Could come quite strong across parts of the Pennines at times, could see some buffeting on the roads here. But really, the lion's share of the wind and rain will be across the north. Some colder air also beginning to seep further south across Scotland, so increasingly cold here with, again, risk of some winteriness in places. But further south, it's generally going to be another mild day. And then for New Year's Eve, a very unsettled picture across the north of the country. Further wind, snow and rain warnings in force here. Fairly dry initially across the south, but some of this rain will spread its way southeastwards as we go through the course of the day. After a very brief calmer interlude, maybe around the bells, another weather system moving in for New Year's Day, bringing a renewed risk of rain, wind and snow.
There will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
You could be joining the Great British Giveaway list of winners with your chance to grab a fantastic £50,000 in tax-free cash.
My name is Cliff. And my name is Julie. And we won $25,000. I'd say don't hesitate, do it. If you're not in it, you've got no chance of winning it.
For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 31st of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
1 in 20 people are diagnosed with seasonal affective disorder across the UK.
Yes, Health Watch has revealed that men
are more likely to suffer from this than women. Did you know?
Triggers apparently include a decrease in daylight hours, which is certainly happening around about now. If you're leaving the office, it's dark. When you come home, it's dark, as well as the falling temperatures.
Yes, and both of those things happen a lot, don't they, here in Britain? So how can we combat the symptoms of seasonal affective disorder? Well, to discuss this, we're joined now by Dr. Andreas von